like, and I love the ACC, but it's almost a lost cause because they've fallen so far behind financially that they just can't keep up.
Welcome in, everybody. We are super excited to bring in one of our favorite guests to have on. Even though sometimes we may disagree on social media about the SEC and other things, he truly is a great guy and a good friend of the show. Job. You can catch him on Dusty and Danny in the morning, CBS Sports HQ, the Cover 3 podcast, and many other places. Danny Kanell. What's up, Danny?
Big Dan. Yes, sir. How are you guys, man? It's great to catch up. It's like, it's May. It's just time to chill. It's like everything's relaxed. I love it because a lot of times, the schedule gets so just bogged down during the college football season. Don't have much free time. So it's great to catch up with you guys. A little more of a relaxed setting and great to be on with you guys as always.
Yeah, for sure, DK. It's always fun. Man, I want to start with a place you're obviously unbelievably familiar with. We got a lot to get to with you, but I want to start kind of homegrown a little bit here with Florida State. You look at the past 2 years, they could not have been more diametrically opposed.
Wow.
I mean, you know what? I just was planning to use that word at some point this week. We know what happened with the undefeated not going to the college football playoff, and then obviously it fallen off a cliff last year. My question's kind of a two-parter. One, how do you feel about this Florida State team, the roster going into this year? And is Mike Norvell truly on a hot seat if they were to have, and I'm not saying 2-10, but 6-6 or 5-7, kind of where do you see Florida State and his relationship right now?
So about how I feel about their roster, I don't know. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat about, how good is this roster? How could it be? How good could it be? Or potentially how bad could it be? It depends on your perspective. I think Florida State fans are a little bit shell-shocked because I'm trying not to use we, but I am a Florida State fan. I am a Florida State, alum. So I would say we, and I would put myself in this category, got a little bit chesty after the undefeated season, and it was like, hey, we deserved a shot. And I still believe that. And I still wonder what would have happened had we been given a shot. But, it's interesting. With Jordan Travis just announcing he's retiring from the sport of football, it kind of brought up a discussion of like, what would have happened had he not gotten hurt? And then I think they would have gotten in. And I think, potentially they could have challenged for a national championship, but he didn't. And the way that bowl game against Georgia unfolded in the Orange Bowl, when I think you started the start of a little bit of a culture issue creep in, where a lot of the players, opted out. They said, we're out, we're going to go on, which I would not fault anybody for doing. But then the following season, again, remember, chesty Florida State fans are thinking, no, we're going to show them this year. And Florida State was a trendy pick to win the ACC. I mean, it was, you got DJU, you had another nice transfer portal class, and then the Georgia Tech game happens, and it was all downhill after that first drive. First drive of the game, they marched right down the field, and Florida State fans are cocky, thinking, oh, we're going to be right back in the playoff. And then, of course, we know now it was anything but. So I think you've got a little bit of a shell-shocked fan base who doesn't know what to think. And I would put myself in that category because, I see their win total, which is 7.5. And I'm like, man, I see a point spread against Alabama, which is up to almost 12 now. And I get all of these things, but I think just it's skewed because we did just witness a 2 wins. That was the worst season we've ever seen in my lifetime of a Florida State football program. So how do you bounce back from that? I think it's crucial that they have a strong performance against Alabama, which is kind of crazy that Florida State's at a place where you're just hoping you're competitive, not that you win the game. So like that kind of goes to the shell-shocked mentality of the fan base, anybody kind of trying to project what they could do, because I could also envision a scenario where they potentially could be a 10-win team. But I'm very much aware they could also be a 6-win team or worse. When you lose at home to schools like Memphis, you can't chalk up any W's in the win column as just automatics. So I'm a little bit like I am cautiously optimistic because in this portal-heavy environment, you can have a quick turnaround. But I'm also very well aware of what happened last year. So I'm like, well, I hope it goes better. I just rambled for a while. I don't know.
No,
if
that's
that.
No. I'm with you. I mean, my biggest thing when I look at Florida State, and we sat here and said during the last offseason, DJU is not an elite player. Like all the Florida State fans in our mentions that were like, Mike Norvell's going to fix them, like it's some weird science experiment that he's somehow going to teach a guy in his 4th or 5th year to take that next step. Not that it's never happened, but it rarely happens, and we didn't think he was that talented. I do like some of the guys you brought in, but DK, to me, when I look at Florida State, I was more shocked about how bad y'all were up front and in the front 7 on defense. Because having an average to below average quarterback is one thing, but the one way to mask that is if you're damn good on the offensive line, and then on defense in the front 7, I'm used to watching Florida State have cats running around. It's like watching Miami on defense last year. I'm still not used to, in my brain, seeing them be soft as baby poop in the front 7 on defense, and that's what they were. So to me, that's the biggest jump if you want to, get back to winning the way that Florida State did. But where do you see Mike Norvell this year, Danny? Like where seat, gets in the car, turns the seat warmer on? Are we all the way because it's freezing like hell outside, or where are we?
You guys remember after the season where they did go undefeated in the regular season and they won the ACC championship game, I do think it was very real that he was an option for Alabama. And it was Kalen DeBoer, it was Mike Norvell, and Dan Lanning. I think those were kind of the guys that Alabama was talking to. And if you remember, Florida State, being aware of this, handed him a nice new contract extension. So as a result, I do think the buyout is prohibitive. Florida State is not in a situation like Texas A&M where they can just cut a check for $67, $68 million. It would be a little bit less than that, but I still think it's over $50 million that Mike Norvell would be owed if it's another rough season. So he's under a hot seat from the perspective of he'll take even more heat the following year, but I don't think he's going anywhere.
Okay.
I don't think he can be fired, which is a great position to be in from security, but from a Florida State fan base, like you don't want to have a fan base that kind of realizes, oh, our football coach can't get it done. Yeah. So he needs to kind of engender the fan base, win them back over to show that the undefeated season was not a fluke. And so he's not going anywhere. He's not going to get fired. I like him personally. I have a pretty good relationship with him. I like his philosophy. I like his mentality. I like his energy, but it is an absolute bottom line business. And I do think they have been a little bit too transfer portal heavy and not enough recruitment, high school recruiting heavy, where there's a balance on the roster, which is why you get these wild, incredible swings. It was funny. We saw it with Colorado with Deion, and everybody's talking about it. We saw the first season was a little bit of a disaster. Last year, they're better. I think they could be a disaster next year. Like, you got to get out of this roller coaster mindset. And that's what I would like to see, a little bit more balance on the recruiting trail as well as the transfer portal, because it's a little bit too, you can't be reliant on transient players that are just coming in there that might only be there for 1 year. You guys all know this. It's a chemistry game. It's a locker room game. As much as it is X and O's and studs on the defense, it's way bigger than that, and it's really hard to develop those things over 8 months, which is oftentimes how long you have these guys on campus.
Agree 100%. That's why football is the ultimate team sport, Blaine. And that Bama game, week 1, whoo!
Oh, I can't wait.
You want to talk about a thermometer game, where to set it at? We're going to see.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Hey, Danny, I heard everything you were saying about it being May and taking an opportunity to take a deep breath and all that good stuff. But then you wake up on a Monday morning and your head coach is suspended. Okay. So to catch people up who may just be hearing about this, the University of Michigan has suspended head football coach Sherrone Moore for 2 games this season. Now, not weeks 1 and 2, because that would be too easy and that would make too much sense. Weeks 3 and 4 against Central Michigan and Nebraska regarding the Connor Stallions advanced scouting. I'll continue to be baffled by an organization that says, hey, we think you broke one of our rules, but we're going to make you punish yourself. We won't get involved unless we don't think your punishment was severe enough. What do you think that it's a bad look for Michigan to continue suspending their own head coaches rather than forcing the NCAA to do their job?
I think all of this is just such the perfect example of how flawed our system is. I mean, the NCAA is broken. They're about to be an extinct entity. They have little to no power that they can rule over everyone. And this feels like they almost want this to be their swan song, where they're kind of still trying to, impose their will and showcase some of their diminishing power in the ability to, hold these types of investigations. it's all just a laughable joke. It really is. And then not only that, but the fact that you're not going to be in. Have we ever seen a middle of the year suspension? Like, I don't know if we've ever seen that. Like, that didn't come where the infraction didn't happen right away. But we knew it going into the season. Oh, yeah, weeks 3 and 4, because you don't want to be out for the Oklahoma game. Like, it's just bizarre the way all of this is unfolding. It's a complete mess. I don't even, like, I'm so over all of it. And I know, David, you and I could probably have a debate on what the Connor Stallions bring and how much of an infraction was it and the punishment, those types of arguments, which we had 2 years ago when it all unfolded. But by now, it just feels like it's semantics. It feels like it's optics. It feels like, I think Michigan is trying to get out in front of this and trying to alleviate some of the punishment that could be coming. But is this all going to matter, like, in the greater scope of things? Probably not. It just feels such like an NCAA move from a decade ago that we need to get past, and we're going to get past, because we're going to be in a new structure, in a new system, with a new entity running college football. And this just reminds me of everything that's been broken in college football.
Okay, so obviously, like you said, in the 2023 season when Michigan won the national championship, the NCAA didn't step in to suspend Jim Harbaugh. They forced the Big Ten to act in the middle of the year during the Penn State game and through the end of that year, which, we all know quite well now. And even now, the University of Michigan, like you said, is trying to get out in front of this. But if the NCAA's power is truly dwindling, the way that you say and the way that we've talked about on our show, then if you're the University of Michigan, why do anything? If that power is truly dwindling at the NCAA, does this not make it look more like Sherrone Moore and anyone who's still on staff actually did something they weren't supposed to be doing, whereas the narrative before, and look, Connor Stallions, full transparency, is a friend of our show. He's been on our show. I loved listening to his story about signal deciphering. I think that it's an important part of the game. I think everyone should go watch that interview we did with him. But if it was just someone going rogue on in-person scouting and he's already not with the program anymore, does this make it look like there's more to it, or is the University of Michigan just trying to placate and appease the NCAA?
Both. I think it looks like both. I think it does look like, there's some information out there that could be more incriminating, and we've heard about the text messages. We've even seen, had a couple of them revealed. It does make it feel like there's more out there, and it also makes it feel like you are appeasing the NCAA. Like, I wonder if Harbaugh hadn't left for the Chargers, if he was there, if he would still be self-imposing sanctions, because he was, pretty hard line and would not cooperate with the initial investigation with the cheeseburger and all that stuff that went on. Like, he was kind of over the NCAA. So it does make me wonder, like, why is Michigan doing this? Because again, I don't think the NCAA is going to have the power to do very much in a year or two. I guess in the short term, maybe they realize something is coming sooner rather than later. That would tell me, like, I would expect something to be out in the next couple months, like before this season, that they're trying to get out in front of. But even if you're the NCAA, wouldn't you be insulted? Oh, you get to choose when your punishment is? So, like, I mean, this just makes zero sense from so many different levels.
It's like I run a red light and I get to, I
you get to pull it over and you get to decide your own ticket.
Aren't there punishments that are commensurate with the violations?
Well, see, this is the only situation where I agree with the way that the Chinese do it over there right now. They don't tell you, it's something bad happened. No, it didn't. We have a housing crisis. No, we don't. COVID started over here? No, it didn't. A turtle hooked up with a penguin somewhere in South America. That's how it started. This is why, like, self-imposing, you're going to have to come get me. That's the difference in the SEC.
See,
y'all going to have to break in. Y'all going to have to break in Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible style, come down from the ceiling and get the files.
No SEC team would be doing this.
Here's the thing.
We'll fake grocery store.
There are no files. We burned those up 10 minutes after it happened. This just feels like he said, either Michigan, you did something like else that we don't know about, but you think they may know about, and you're trying to get ahead of it, or you're just trying to look like the good guys. You're just trying to, it's like the guy from Da Vinci Code that hits himself with the whip
This is a settlement.
This
is what y'all are trying to go for a settlement.
I saw that Baylor football had a similar situation in 2016 where an assistant coach went and in-person scouted, and his punishment was a half-game suspension. And that was for the assistant who was there.
What did y'all do? What, David?
Look,
well,
I heard we didn't do anything.
All right, you want to go super conspiracy theory on it? Because I did see this theory floating around there. There's Santa Ono just left, to be the, he's the school president at Michigan, just left to go to Florida. And it was just announced in the past 24 hours. Then we have this Sherrone Moore announcement, like in the span of 24 hours. It does seem, and I didn't think anything of the Santa Ono thing. I was like, hey, maybe he just got a bigger paycheck and he wants to go live somewhere warm. I didn't think much of it. I didn't buy into that. And I'm sure some Ohio State fans were probably the ones that were proposing that theory. But it is a little bit interesting that these two things happened this close together. So I am genuinely curious because I don't know why they would come out with this. I don't know why you would self-impose a 2-game suspension. I would challenge it and wait and see what they do, because they've already tried to do some of this. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I do wonder if there is something that the NCAA has or holding on to where there's more information that does look way more incriminating than what we already have. But we also have seen the NCAA bring down the book and have zero consistency in their punishments across the board, like David's talking about. So, like, I have no idea what they're going to do.
Everything's fine.
Well, you can hear a train before you see it.
Well, the only thing, y'all have a guy named Santa?
Well, we did, apparently.
He's at Florida.
I guess he's gone to Florida. They won a basketball championship in our President League.
If he can't even get y'all off the naughty list.
Look, if Santa can't fix it, you guys are screwed.
And Santa was
we're calm, perfectly calm right now.
I will say, Santa Ono was the president that was fully behind his team. I mean, he was one that was like defiant, was like, we didn't do anything wrong. So he's always been somebody who's
And where'd he go, Danny? To the SEC. To the SEC. The one guy, the one president we had who was pro football, he runs to the SEC.
Christmas is
Look, I love how we're talking about conspiracies in here. It kind of fits. Danny, I want to take it back a little bit. All right, I want to go back to the beginning. Okay, back to when you were just, no hate anywhere, not any hate affiliation to any conference. I want to know what happened on what day, what year, what month that turned you against the SEC. All right, when did you think that where in the doll did the SEC touch you? Because I know from your point of view now.
Oh, he's looking
down. You're an Anakin Skywalker and the Jedi.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I want to bring
this is something my daughters actually ripped off my head. They used to play with my action figure, and they lost the head. So maybe that's where it started, Blaine. I don't know where it started.
Yeah.
So it was never.
My head fell off too. Hold on. My head fell off too.
Yeah, look at Cones.
Look at this.
Nice. That is awesome.
And Bolin's dad. With the uncertainty surrounding tariffs, families across the country are potentially facing another wave of price increases at the grocery store. But there's good news. Everybody calm down, relax, Blaine. GoodRanchers.com is completely tariff-proof thanks to their 100% American supply chain.
Yeah.
You'll get stable prices for high-quality meat grown right here in the good old USA without worrying about tariff-related price hikes, because the average family throws away $500 worth of meat and seafood every year. But Good Ranchers helps you avoid this waste with their vacuum-sealed, individually wrapped cuts that stay fresh for a year in your freezer. Plus, their cuts are pre-trimmed by professional butchers, meaning you only pay for meat you'll actually eat. No more trimming off 10% before cooking. You'll get more value with every bite. We've been using it for 3 years. Every time that Good Ranchers box shows up to my house, it's like Christmas for adults, but even better. And here's an amazing offer. Visit GoodRanchers.com right now and use our code BOOSTER, that's BOOSTER, to get $40 off your order plus free meat for life when you subscribe. Choose from free ground beef, wild-caught salmon, seed oil-free chicken nuggets, or bacon in every box forever. That's $300 of free meat every year for as long as you stay subscribed. Because in a world full of constant change, your mealtime can stay consistent and affordable. So visit GoodRanchers.com today. Use code BOOSTER for $40 off and free meat for life. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered.
So I would say when I was playing in the NFL, it was funny because I didn't watch much college football. I was so engrossed in trying to make a team and, make it, I was an NFL quarterback and I didn't watch a ton on Saturdays. In my last couple of years when I was with the Broncos, Gary Kubiak was our offensive coordinator. And we did like a little pick'em in the quarterback rooms that I was in. It was Jake Plummer and Bradley Van Pelt and Matt Mock, former LSU quarterback. We were in the quarterback room. And I remember he would bring out the USA Today with all the lines and we would just circle our picks and we would go. And I remember that was like the first time I started to like pay attention to college football. And then I was out of like football altogether. I was in business. Like I had an investment management company. So I still wasn't really paying. I was kind of scarred. Like I still wanted to play in the NFL. I was kind of bitter. Watching football kind of stung still. So I didn't watch a ton. I would say when I started getting into broadcasting and started breaking it down, I started to notice, and this is a long time ago. This is 2008, 2009.
The Bama
I was
rise.
working at ESPNU on a show called The Experts, and we would have these debates and we would break down the game. And I started to notice the way that certain people, and a lot of them played in the SEC, and they started saying things like it's different. And, David Pollack was a young broadcaster at the time. And, I'm not calling him out, but it was like the guys that played in the SEC, Chris Doering, worked with him. They would talk about it and they would say, it's different. No, it's so different. It's better. And I was like, well, are we sure? Like, really? And at the time, it was way more of a level playing field. Like I remember when I used to like really pay attention to the NFL draft. I mean, there was a couple years when the ACC was only like 5 players behind the SEC, and the SEC had 2 more teams. And I used to go like nuts because they started the claims of we've had the most players drafted, and they did. But I was like, no one's asking the questions or breaking this down. And it was more neck and neck. And the ACC was closer. But I would say for the last, I think this is one of those things where they sort of spoke it into existence and it became a thing, the conference pride, and they really marketed it. And whether it was Mike Slive or Greg Sankey or whether it was them to have the conference championship game, they really did, like when it just means more, they did treat it like it just means more. And I do think that them kind of speaking that into existence became something that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, where now it's like, how do you argue against a lot of the records and the success and the players that are drafted? So now I do more of a lot of the stuff I'll do, and you guys know this, like on X is more fun. It's kind of poking the bear.
For sure. That's what a lot of people don't realize.
Right. But then there are certain times where, like for me, this is one thing I'll never understand is like cheering for conferences. Like that drives me nuts. Like, and that's why I always find like the Kentucky fan who's puffing his chest out about football, or a Vanderbilt fan, or somebody that hasn't won a national championship. Arkansas, like I don't want to offend every fan base.
No, keep going, Danny. Please keep going.
I could rattle them all off, the ones that don't have a national championship. But oftentimes, those are the ones who are puffing out their chest the most. Like Alabama fans rarely are like trying to justify the SEC because they're like, who cares? We're good. Georgia fans, they don't care. Like, I almost don't like it, I think, when they feel like those fans hopping on the bandwagon. It's like, let us enjoy our success now. So, like, if people say something about Florida State specifically, that's when I'll try to like fight back. Or if it's about Clemson specifically, or even Miami specifically, I'm like, wait a second, you might be punishing them too much for a schedule that they played, where it was like, all right, well, they still played really good against the SEC. So I get more specific now. But as far as like conference supremacy and top to bottom strength and recruiting rankings and fan support, the SEC really does sit atop. But I do think the Big Ten is closing that gap. And that's where I think, like, and I love the ACC, but it's almost a lost cause because they've fallen so far behind financially that they just can't keep up. So there very clearly is a delineation between the Power Two, the Super Two, whatever you want to call them, and, in the SEC and Big Ten, and then the ACC and Big 12. Like, I've given up that fight. And like with the new proposals for the college football playoff, where it's going to be 4 automatic qualifiers and then 2 and 2. And people expected me to get upset about that. I'm like, no, I'll take 2 because I would rather be 2 than 1.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was honestly worried about.
Well, Danny, I want to ask this kind of a follow-up to that quickly while we still have you. When we do go to this Super League, which I feel like we all know is coming, right? I mean, we got a good feeling that it's going to be a breakaway from the NCAA and be a Super League. There's probably going to be split into 2 conferences. I don't think they're going to go away with the SEC or the Big Ten, so you would think that those would be the 2 conferences. And I know Brett Yormark's doing everything he can. I think he's made every right move you could possibly make with the Big 12. I really think he has. Now, with the ACC, are we seeing the end of the ACC? Like, can you see the iceberg? Hey, if we don't, if there's not some sort of crazy turning of the ship and it may be too late, we're going to run into this thing and then Billy Zane's going to head for the lifeboats.
Did you guys happen to see that Antarctica actually added ice?
Gained ice? Yes,
for the first time.
But I thought we were all going to die in 12 years. Right. I thought the Earth was going to be flooded, Danny. That's
well, I would say the equivalent. Because you're talking about the ACC potentially going away, and I'm saying, well, wait a second. There might be a little ice that built back up. Was this revenue the revenue distribution model that they just announced, where Florida State, Clemson, Miami, others will get a more significant portion of the revenue from the TV deal than Boston College, Wake Forest. Now, I very much think that was a temporary Band-Aid where it kind of resolved. Like, you haven't heard anything about the lawsuit with Clemson and Florida State. You haven't heard Florida State rattling the cage saying, we want to get out. It's kind of appeased everyone for a period, I think, of about 4 years. And then but as somebody who just wants a little bit of stability and wants to stop talking about, what could potentially happen, I think that's a good thing. I do think it gives Florida State and Clemson, the top teams in the ACC, more of a chance to compete financially against the Big Ten and SEC, but it still isn't feasible over the long haul, over the next 10, 20 years. So I think it was a temporary Band-Aid until we get to that new shift in college football, which you're talking about, Jake, which is like everyone kind of knows this is coming. So I do envision a scenario where it looks completely different. And, what does it look like? But I would say the chances that, that the landscape looks like it does now with a Power 4 are slim to none.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a follow-up question, because we were talking about this last week, Danny, when it comes to the ACC schools like Florida State and Clemson that now get the bigger lion's share of distribution from the ACC deal, which, like you said, was a Band-Aid to keep that conference together. But now that we're looking down the barrel of this House versus NCAA settlement coming through in the next month, right? And possibly programs being able to revenue share up to $20.5 million with their football players and with their rosters, or really with all of the sports, but it sounds like 70 to 75% is going to be shared with football specifically. How is that going to impact that conference, when you have a couple programs getting to sort of run away and share most of their revenue? And more importantly, how much longer are schools in the SEC going to look at what you were saying earlier, when you have Georgia and Alabama and LSU saying, wait, why are we allowing the bottom of our conference to piggyback off of our success? I need $20.5 million extra dollars on top of our collective to be able to remain competitive with the rest of the country.
This is such a conversation for college football, and it's such a rabbit hole. Once you start looking at, and that's why whenever I get asked, and when I was about fixing the playoffs, was it fixing conference realignment, whatever it was, you start unraveling just how many issues there are in the sport. Because I totally agree with you. I think there were absolutely SEC teams that were paying attention and saying, oh, really? Those programs that have bigger brands and have had more success, they're going to get a bigger portion of the pie. They're like, that sounds interesting. And like you said, I'm sure they don't love splitting, the revenue with a Vanderbilt or with a Kentucky, in football. And so they're looking at this saying, if they did it, why can't we? I do think that's why we go to a Super League where it all becomes more even. But the 20.5, the revenue share, I actually think is a great thing for schools in the ACC that weren't investing, didn't have the collective strength in the form of NIL collectives to have any fighting chance. Like, I've talked to some ACC coaches who are like, we were talking about who their quarterback, who their market is in the portal. And he's like, honestly, we only could go after a quarterback that we can pay $250,000, $300,000. He's like, do you know where that puts us as far as who we're shopping for? And it was bottom of the barrel.
Well, you're always drafting in the 5th round. You're never drafting in the first 2 rounds, really, is what it turns into.
Exactly. And so from that perspective, I actually do think it could strengthen the bottom of the ACC now that you've got schools that can actually spend this money, don't have to go begging to boosters who may be pretty, neutral on the sport of football. There's some high academic institutions that are like, I don't care about football. I just want to have a school that's well known for his academic prowess. But now at least you have that 20.5 that you can go spend. And even if it's 70, 75%, that's way more than what they've been spending now and just been getting crushed in the portal because their best players who they find as 3 stars, they get developed and then they just get plucked right from their roster. So I think that could be the good thing. Can I ask you guys something?
Yeah.
Because this is one thing that I cannot wrap my mind around, because in theory, I think a salary cap would be awesome. If everybody's playing with a level playing field, and this is coming from an ACC guy, I think that could potentially save the other conferences from running away if they were all only allowed to spend 20.5 on their roster. And then I've been told that the NIL is going to become true NIL, right? It's going to be true marketing dollars. So if you have a Arch Manning who Red Bull is willing to pay $1 million, then he can get above and beyond the rev share that's there. Do you guys honestly think that schools aren't going to still try to load up and pay above and beyond the 20.5 or even less? It's only going to be 15. You know, if it's 70, 75%, like there's still going to be teams that are going to try to cheat. Every athletic director I've asked about this has said, no, we're going to really enforce this. We're going to enforce this. That's BS. There's no way they're going to be able to stop schools from spending extra.
David Cohn, Danny, I'm so glad you asked this because, and it was one where we did the top 10 NIL collectives from last year,
Friday.
Right? Brought this up last Friday that said, wait a minute, I'm looking at what they're saying if this settlement versus the House gets approved, and there's still nothing about collective bargaining in there. So there's no way to, in my mind, that there's not going to be lawsuits that you can bring against anybody, whatever, NCAA, whatever, if you want to go above it. Like, what's going to keep me? To me, it's exactly like when we sanction other countries' oil. We're like, all right, Iran, you can't sell this oil, and China, you can't buy it from them. But then they just do it, and they're on the black market, nothing else happens. Like, what are you going to do? Yeah. What happens if Texas spends $40.5 million? What are you going to do? And then they're going to sue you and say, well, we don't have collective bargaining. Even when you look at where the NCAA is coming out on saying, can we get sued if they go over this cap, which would take effect July 1st, 2025, if it gets passed before that, they're still saying, well, it's still open to litigation for teams that want to spend more than that. To me, it's a waste of time because if I can spend the money and I can get away with it, I'm going to do it. It's just like, again, at the end of the day, you talked about NCAA enforcement back in the day when you could pay players illegally. They knew everybody was paying everybody. They even caught some people, but they would only enforce it to certain institutions because, again, what are they going to do? Tell Texas, no, you guys are out of the playoffs for 2 years. Are you kidding me? You know how much money with Arch Manning that team would make on TV? Cohn brought it up. Cohn's the first person.
Million last year.
David is the first person I've seen bring that up.
You can't have a salary cap unless you have collective bargaining and give the players a chance to have their say. This was like when you were in the NFL. That's how it works in professional sports. Or unless they can bypass that and have Congress issue an antitrust exemption and say, no, collegiate athletics gets to work antitrust and you get to like cap the salaries, which I don't think that's a Band-Aid that's going to stick. But in theory, even if you collectively bargained or had an exemption from Congress and they did put a cap on all of college football, that alone doesn't stop one school from going out and spending $5 to $10 million more dollars. The only thing that stops it is the punishment you hand down when it gets found out, which don't let it be Michigan, because I guarantee you, Hammer will get dropped, son.
Yeah, well, Danny, to that point, think about the example you just gave of true NIL. If they say, all right, listen, the cap counts for everything except if Red Bull wants to give Arch Manning $8 million and they can go over it. So if I'm Oregon and I'm Phil Knight, I'm like, well, what if Nike wants to give somebody $15 million? What about if I'm Arkansas? Man, Tyson Chicken or Walmart. So you're telling me I can go over it. So why don't I just go to the people that already sponsor my school? Or will they say, no. A company that is a sponsor of the institution cannot be directly. You can't do that. You can't do that in America. So how does this work?
So there is this new enforcement arm, right? We realized there was this new kind of setup that we're going to where the NCAA is falling by the wayside, that there's going to be this new enforcement wing that is signed off on by the Power 4 schools. And they're going to have a CEO and they're going to have somebody who monitors this. And so what I've been told is that there's going to be this enforcement arm and they're going to actually have a formula that shows what your true NIL value is. And if teams violate that NIL value, that's when they'll start coming down with the enforcement wing and they'll start doling out punishment. So in the example I gave, they would say, well, Arch Manning, he's got millions of followers on Instagram. He's got the last name Manning. So yes, it seems reasonable that Red Bull would pay him $1 million. And they're going to have to submit anything over $600 to this enforcement wing.
I saw that.
To see it subjected to this evaluation. But again, this seems like the most un-American thing ever.
Yeah.
Because who's to say whatever car dealership resides in Fayetteville doesn't say, you know what? Taylor Green, he seems like $1 million to me. I'm going to pay him $1 million. But I guess in theory, the enforcement arm could run this through their formulas and say, hold on a second. The true market value of Taylor Green's, endorsement money would only be $250,000. You guys are in violation of that, and they could hand out a punishment. That's the kind of setup that that's been explained to me, and they're going to try to monitor to make sure that there's not just cash funneled for play, that they really have to be endorsement. Because there's always been, like when I played in New York, there was a benefit to playing in that market. Like you got better marketing opportunities from playing in that market. And I think there's a value to playing in a Duke Blue Devil basketball jersey, right? You can have a shoe deal that is worth more than somebody that's playing, in, I don't know, some mid-major that's not as marketable. So I don't know how they're going to police that without getting the pantsuit off of them.
Yeah,
but
you're setting prices. You're setting quotas and setting prices. But to that point, if it's an ever-evolving thing, what happens if they're sitting there before the season saying, okay, let's use this season, for example. All right, Arch Manning is worth this. And he goes up to Ohio State and throws for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Well, how much more am I worth now? Like, I just went and balled in the first game. Like, my market value is never going to work.
Any value is only what someone is willing to spend on it. I mean, this is what we said with DJ Uiagalelei went to Florida State. Some of us weren't as hot on it as others. Why is he in the Dr. Pepper commercial? It just gets me thinking, Danny, even in your NFL example, I mean, what happens if you go play quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons where Arthur Blank owns the team and he used to be the CEO at Home Depot? Can they not get backdoor deals where you now have sponsorship deals from Home Depot as long as you're a Falcons player, and that's unofficially off the books and doesn't count against the salary cap? Like, I don't know how you guard against some of this stuff.
It's look, the more we talk about this, and I hate to say, the more I'm like, they're going to have to make them employees, man. Like that's.
Well, did you guys see about the meeting that Trump had with Nick Saban? I'm sure you guys.
What do you think would come out of it? Like, what can they do?
Well, like what David had mentioned is where Trump would step in, he would sign the executive order giving them the antitrust exemption. Do you guys know who Cody Campbell is? He's the Texas
that name sounds
Tech.
Familiar.
He's the Texas Tech booster, like billionaire booster. He is their Phil Knight. He is their guy. He's made oil money, sold 2 companies for over $3 billion. He's the one. That's why they have the #1 transfer portal class. It's why they signed Najee Kennedy, the softball player.
I'd love to be his friend if he's watching this.
Right. He was an offensive lineman at Texas Tech. So we had him on my radio show, and we were asking him, we were having almost all this exact same conversation. And you could tell, like, there's a little bit of despair in his voice about the direction. And if anybody would not want the system that we're having in place, it would be him, because he would cut whatever over the 20.5. He'd be like, yeah, I'll pay whoever to come play for Texas Tech. He said he felt like the only thing that would solve the problems that we're in, and without making them employees, without collective bargaining, was Donald Trump stepping in. He told us that 2 weeks ago. And then the meeting with Saban came about. But what scares me is in our political, hyper-political environment that we're in, if Trump steps in and signs an executive order, you know exactly what's going to happen. It'll be the same thing that happened when Trump stepped in and said, I think we should play college football during COVID. Leftist people on the opposite side of that view are going to hate it, and they're going to start saying, no, we cannot have that. And that's what worries me, because I do think it could be the solution. But if Trump signs that executive order, I think all of a sudden, like we do with Trump, anytime he does something, the opposing view loses their mind and doesn't see anything good to come of it.
Well, this is why Senator Tommy Tuberville was trying to go through Congress rather than executive order, and was trying to partner with Joe Manchin across the aisle so that they could form a bill together. And look, I know that Nick Saban just met with President Trump, but so did the three of us recently, and we pitched DOSE, the Department of Sports Efficiency. So maybe we'll get a little bit of the credit.
We're trying to. Saban stole our thunder, I think, and I'm actually looking kind of pissed about him. Again, twice in the same decade. That's crazy. But Danny, man, thanks for being so, I know you got a ton going on, even though it is May and we're gearing up for college football season. Thanks for sticking around with us. Please, again, tell everybody where they can find your stuff. I always try and catch you as much as I possibly can, because real recognize real, my friend.
In the morning, Sirius XM, every morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Dusty and Danny in the morning. Cover 3 pod on CBS Sports, or everywhere you can find your podcast out there. Cover 3 and CBS Sports Network. You guys are awesome, man. Keep crushing it.
Hey, DK, you guys as well, man. I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
I'm surprised we didn't get a combo coverage. They went straight cover 3.
Doing straight cover 3. Look, keep it underneath. Let's get the red zone and mix it up.
Better not those seams.
Field shrinks. Yeah, watch that seam. That linebacker better get your ass back.
Half. Yeah, Danny's all by himself.
Yeah. All right, DK, thanks, buddy.
See you guys.
All right, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for joining us, and get ready. We got some more great content coming.